Dragon Ball Daima episode 6 titled Lightning is here. Man, this was a fun episode. Let's get straight into it. We have a lot to talk about. Last episode, we left off after Goku had gone and met the king of the third demon world, King Kadon, who turned out to be Pansy's father. She is his daughter and therefore the princess of the third demon world. King Kadon wanted Goku to go and defeat Goma so that he could rise up and become the supreme demon king, believing that he would be able to do a much better job. He gave them a plane and they loaded everything up, and as soon as they took off, the plane blew an engine because it exceeded the carrying capacity, and now they are stranded, which is where we begin. So Pansy, she's working to repair the plane, and she asks Shin, Supreme Kai, she asks him why Goku refers to him as a Kai, and we get a pretty sweet moment here. Goku, he jumps in, he's just kind of speaks for Shin. He's just like, well, in our universe, we have these godlike beings, and they're called Kais. And he puts his arm around Shin, and he's just like, and the Supreme Kai is the greatest of all of them. He sits at the top. And Shin, he's a super humble guy. He's just kind of bashful, and he's just like, yeah, I guess so. I don't know about that, but Pansy, she asks him, he's like, oh, she's like, wow, that's incredible. So do you like make a lot of money? Do you profit off of this? And he's just like, no, I don't take money from people. And she's just like, oh, well, that's kind of lame. So, Pansy's cool. She's funny. Goku then turns to Goliro, which is what Goku keeps calling Glorio. And Glorio, he just kind of turns at him. He's kind of irritated. He's just like, "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" Goku's just, "No." And so he has him like pronounce it for him. He's like, "Spell it out for me." He's just like, G Glorio. And so he finally gets it right, but he keeps on making the mistake, and it's a really fun bit. So Goku, he tells him, he's like, hey, before we go, I gotta poop. And, they're all just like, oh, this guy. And Pansy, or Goku asked her, he's like, hey, do you have some paper? And Pansy, she throws this thing like a fastball. It's just like a whole roll of paper, toilet paper, and she just whips it at him, just hits him in the face, and he just falls backwards. And it was we have a lot of comedy in this episode, and it was really good. Uh, it just it just takes me back. I miss this stuff. I'm so happy we're back. While Goku's taking care of his business, a large Gendarmerie plane arrives. So King Goma's, um, military police, they arrive. They show up and they see their plane had crashed, and so they come down and come out and ask him questions. And so far, it seems that people from the first demon world kind of look down on people from the second and third demon worlds. So they interrogate him a little bit, and they're just like, where are you guys from? What worlds are you from? And Glorio is like, oh, I'm from the first demon world. And then Supreme Kai is like, I'm from the second demon world. And they recognize Pansy as, being the third demon world, and they ask her if she has a collar on, one of those slaver collars. And so I don't know if it's everybody in the third demon world, but it does seem to be that um all, if not most of them, are like subservient to people from the first demon world. So Goma, basically, he's basically enslaving an entire world of Majin folk. So Pansy, she actually like kind of pulls down her collar a little bit, and she actually has one. She has one of these like slave collars on her neck, and they're just like, oh, okay, and they use their like stabs, just kind of scans it to basically just like confirm it's real and stuff, and like, okay, so what are you doing here? And there's like, and Shin, he speaks up. He's just like, well, he's like, we're thrill seekers, and we're just here to visit and explore. And this girl's our escort. And there's like, oh, okay. Well, the reason we stopped you is, we're looking. Have you seen this? This kid with spiky hair and a red stick? And there's like, no, we haven't seen anything. And they're like, all right, well, if you do, report him to us because he's a wanted fugitive. And so they take off, and then Goku, and as soon as they take off, Goku comes back around, after doing his work, and he's like fixing his pants and stuff. And he's just like, oh, hey. And so Goku just missed them. And we also get the amount of Goku's bounty that's now out for him. And Goku is now worth 10 gold coins, which I guess is a huge deal for them in the demon worlds. And this whole time, we've been getting lots of Star Wars references, like with Glorio being compared to like Han Solo, Pansy to Leia, and now with Goku having a bounty, I'm just curious if we're gonna end up having some sort of bounty hunter coming after them. Maybe some sort of Majin Boba Fett. So Pansy, she finishes making her repairs on the plane, and she gets it up and running. She's brilliant. And then I'll explain why in a little bit. Um, so they continue on their way, and she asks Shin, she's like, "Hey, is it true that Glens are born from trees?" And he's just like, "Yeah, we are." And so finally, after all this time, we finally get to see a glimpse of these trees that birthed the Kaioshin. And it's cool because these trees, they look like giant purple onions. Um, and they have like branches out sprouting out of the top, and it looks like where you actually see the part that looks like a tree, but the whole bottom half that I guess is the trunk. It's just a big purple onion, and they're huge. We see like a town or something at the bottom of them, and they're just dwarfing it. These things are massive, and there's more than one. So there's five of these trees, five of these Glyn trees is what he calls them, and those are the things that birth the Kaioshin. And we see a kind of a flashback of Shin, and he's just dangling from the tree. He's just this little baby, and instead of like an umbilical cord, he has like one sticking out of his back, and he's just dangling from the tree, and he just gets plucked like a fruit. This is a little bit different from what we were originally told by Toriyama. Originally, it was said that the Kaioshin, so they're born from the World Tree or the Kaiju Tree, I think is the other name. And so they're born as actual fruits, like they're fruits. And golden fruits are the ones that become Kaioshin, and then the fruits that go bad or become sour, they're the ones that become Makaioshin and then remain in the demon world. And so that should be Degesu, Shin's younger brother. But for some reason, they just refuse to use the name. They won't say Makaioshin. I don't know if they're just kind of casting it aside or just, ignoring it, or if they're just going to end up calling them different, something different. But it's kind of bothering me. It's like, come on. We've been waiting all this time for the name. It's a cool name. We finally see the trees. We get to see all this Kaioshin lore. Just say it. It's like, stop playing with us. Stop tickling our nuts. And Goku, so it's really cool. Goku and Daima so far, he's very sharp. Like, he's very smart. When he's still Goku, but he's always listening. And so he asks Supreme Kai, he's just like, well, hey, if you're born from this tree, does that make you a plant? And he's like, is that why you and Kibito are always drinking water? And he's just like, no, no, I wouldn't consider us a plant. And so I like that. I like them, being more thinking of them as more flesh and bone, actual living beings rather than just sentient like fruits, like divine fruits and stuff. That's whatever. It's not a big deal, but I just like that a little bit better. We then learned that Degesu, Shin's younger brother, the guy who's Goma's right-hand man from episode 1, he was born 216 years after Shin. So he's 216 years his younger brother. And they were actually born from the same tree. And Goku, he asks, he's like, hey, so does this mean that all of you are siblings? Like even Kibito or Old Kai? And Shin's just like, no, no, we're not siblings in that regard because they're not born from the same tree. There's actually five of these Glin trees in total, and only him and Degesu and Arinsu, his older sister, were born from the same tree, which is why they refer to each other as siblings, which is really cool. I'm glad they cleared that up. So Pansy asks why he stayed in the demon realm when the rest of the Glins went to the outside world. And he just states that his brother, he was always really ambitious and that he didn't get along with the others. And again, it's just like they won't say it. He's a Makaioshin. He's the bad fruit, the bad apple, quote finger quotes. Um, and so he just doesn't get along with them, and so that's why he stayed. And then Pansy, she actually mentions that there's also a genius scientist in the demon world and who's also a Glind woman. So Shin, he actually acknowledges Arinsu as his older sister. Um, he also says that Glins, so this is the part that bugs me. This is the only thing that has bothered me about this. He says that Glins don't have genders, and so they aren't exactly men or women, which I kind of get. They're these divine beings and stuff. They're born from trees. They don't have like actual like a mother and father for parents, which it's whatever. I guess he just calls her that a sister for fun. Whatever. Anyways, Shin, he refers to Arinsu as that she's always been a bit of a mad scientist, and she's also really ambitious, just like Degesu. and chose the excitement of the demon realm rather than going to the outside world with the others. And so we got a reason. We got a reason on why she stayed, and I guess she just prefers it. She just likes it more. So we see Glorio. He's flying the ship, and right after this conversation, you just kind of see a zoom in on his eyes, and they just narrow after this conversation had happened. And so there's something on his mind. So it's getting late, and we find out that in the demon world, or at least the third demon world, it has two suns. And so, kind of like Planet Namek that had multiple suns. Um, anyway, so they find a place to camp, and they find this big old cave, and they set up camp in there. There, it skips to them. You know, they had made their campfire, and they're just eating. And Shin, he's looking at this can. It kind of looks like a tuna can. It has a big old like bug on it, and he's just like, ugh. And so he's mad. He doesn't have like his bottles of water or anything. And he's just like, what kind of meat is this? Because he hates bugs. This is the third time they've brought that up, that he really dislikes bugs. So it seems that they can eat and do eat, if they have to. Um, but I guess it's just kind of like Piccolo. They prefer water, but they can eat other stuff too. So while they're resting, Pansy, she asks, or she doesn't ask, she tells Glorio, she's like, you look like you're from the third demon world. But he says that he was hired by higher ups in the first demon world. Um, and she's like, well, who hired you? And he's just like, well, does it really matter? And so, he's just dodging the question. He's not answering because he's trying to keep a secret. And Pansy, she gets annoyed with him. She's just like, I can't, man, you're so gloomy. It's such a waste of good looks. And so she finds him cute, but, you know, his bad attitude is just kind of off-putting, which is, again, very similar to Han Solo and Leia, but, we'll see. While Goku and the others had fallen asleep, Glorio had snuck outside of the cave, and he's on the phone with somebody, and he's talking about how the plan is going, how things are going well. And we finally see it, guys. Right here, we get a glimpse of Dr. Orinsu again. She's in her lab or library. She's talking to Glorio on the phone. So we know now who hired Glorio, who he's working for, and that explains why he, was reacting the way he was when her name was brought up earlier. And so he goes back to bed after, hanging up, and he walks by Shin, Supreme Kai, and he's just laying there and he just opens his eye. So he was awake the whole time. So we don't know if he heard everything, but we do know he was aware he was on the phone with somebody, and it seemed to be his benefactor. Suddenly, large footsteps shook the cave. Goku Goku, he remains sound asleep the entire time as these large footsteps get closer and closer. Glorio and Pansy wake up like, what's happening? Where's that coming from? And it's like, oh, something's deeper inside of the cave and it's getting closer. And this big old, not giant, but this big minotaur just comes up and he just fills the cave and he's just covered in shadow. He just roars at him. And then finally Goku wakes up. Goku's the best. He looks at this thing and he's just like, what? It's a big cow. Why are you guys freaking out? And so this thing can actually talk. And it's just when Goku says that, he's just like, what? I'm not a cow. I'm a minotaur. And Glorio, he's just like, oh, all right. And so once they calm down, Glorio's just like, all right, well, I'll deal with this thing. And then Goku's just like, wait, hold on. I'll deal with him. This thing's too strong for you. And Glorio, he just kind of stops. He looks at Goku. He's just like,
Excuse me?
Glorio, he tells Goku, he's like, you shouldn't be so arrogant. Do you really think you're that much stronger than I am? And Goku, in his genuine bluntness, he's just like, I'm not bragging about anything. I'm just telling you how it is. And so Glorio, he's like, okay, well, let's go outside and let's find out. And this whole time, the Minotaur's just like looking at back and forth between them all. He's just like, are these guys ignoring me? And they had just completely ignored that it was even in the room. So they go outside, prepare to fight with each other. And even the Minotaur comes out and he's just watching this. And he just went from like this cave monster that wanted to eat them, and now he's just on the sidelines spectating because they weren't paying any attention to him. And honestly, he's just a big chump. He's a big monster. He'd probably be strong and dangerous for regular people who didn't have power or magic or anything like that, but to them he's nothing. He's literally just a big cow. And you know how that meme about Goku, how if he knows he's stronger than you, he becomes the most disrespectful person there is? And here's a really good example of it. So he tells Glorio, he's like, "Okay, well, I'll fight you with one arm behind my back." So we're episodes into Daima at this point. We've gotten a fight um each episode since episode 3, I believe. And every single time, I've said this before, it just gets better and better and better. Every single fight, every single action sequence, we get a little more choreography, more action. And now we get a really cool and a really fun fight between Goku and Glorio. So they go at each other. Goku rushes in, swings his big old punch at Glorio, just barely misses him. And from the first swing, like you can see that Glorio's just like, I can't get hit by this guy. Supreme Kai, Pansy, and the Minotaur, they're just watching in shock. They're just wide-eyed at these two going at it. But even though Goku is clearly stronger, Glorio's not a chump. He's not a pushover either. And Goku even acknowledges this. He's like, okay, hey, I think I underestimated you. So Glorio, he's backs up, he raises his arm to the sky. He's like kind of like a spirit gun pose. And he's just pointing it and lightning just starts flashing from his finger. And he just charges this big old attack and Goku's like, "What is that?" And he's like, "It's magic." And so this is one of Glorio's magical abilities, and it seems to be some sort of lightning. And he fires this thing at Goku. He just fires this blast at him. Goku leaps out of the way. It just leaves a, it's just a big explosion. Just leaves this crater in the ground below him. And Goku's just like, whoa. And then Shin, he looks up to Goku. He's just like, hey, he's like, Goku, I want to see how strong Glorio is, so you have to go all out or not all out, but I want you to take this seriously. You have to fight harder than what you're doing. He's like, and Goku just smiles at him. He's like, all right, I will. So Goku whips out his pole. He whips out his power pole and he rushes towards Glorio. He's just flying towards him. I love this shot. This animation right here is so pretty. So he's flying in towards him. Glorio's shooting these attacks at him. Goku's, avoiding each of them. Rushes up to Glorio and he pulls out his power pole and he just hits him in the body, just straight in the gut. Just boom. It's like a clothesline, but just right in the gut. Just Glorio, his eyes are just blank, when he gets hit and he gets slammed. He goes flying into like this cliffside and he's obscured by all the smoke and stuff and Goku just smiles and then all of a sudden Glorio, he's still standing. So Glorio, he's no chump. We saw what he was capable of in the past couple of episodes and he's good. So he's standing there, calls out, he brings out, creates more lightning, uses his lightning magic, and he uses it like a whip. And so we see it just kind of like just swirl around his arm, and he's just holding it like a whip, and he snaps it, and the whip just goes, smacks the power pole right out of Goku's hand, and Goku's just like, holy cow, this guy is good. So Glorio, he starts charging another attack, and at this point, this is probably my favorite part of the episode. Goku, he like looks at his hand, and just this golden aura is just circling his fist, and it's his Super Saiyan power. It's kind of like what we saw last time, like where we just saw a glimpse of like the golden light from Super Saiyan, but it's just around his hand. And then Goku, he just looks up. We see his eyes just do that smooth, just that transition, just from black to green, and just and he's Super Saiyan. And Goku just blows up in this energy, and this transformation is really cool. It's probably one of my favorite ones for Super Saiyan. And Glorio's just shaking. Like he's just shaking watching this whole thing. It's like, what in the world? And so it's like last episode. So even though Goku used Super Saiyan just for an instant, it seems that Glorio didn't actually really get to see what happened. And so, but here he's just shaking. He's trying to charge his attack, and he has to like lock in and fire this thing. And so Glorio, he fires this blast that he charged up, and it fires off like a Makanko Sapo or like a special beam cannon. Just boom, this big beam just bolts towards Goku, and Goku, he's just standing there. He's not moving an inch. He's just in Super Saiyan, all his glory, and he's just watching this thing get close. Braces himself, throws out his hand, just boom, just negates the whole thing, just smothers the attack completely. It's the shot that we saw where he like uses the tips of his fingers and just disperses it. Beautiful shot. And then Goku, we just hear like the instant transmission just and he's right behind Glorio and Glorio is just frozen. Goku just reaches out, places his hand on his back and Glorio just looks back at him. He's just like, "All right, I yield." And the fight ends. Goku just pats him on the back, and that's that. And Pansy, she's just in awe watching this, and and Goku clarifies once again that he doesn't use magic like them. He's like, I don't use magic. And this whole time, the Minotaur who was watching by, he's trying to sneak away, and Goku's like, "Hey, I'm ready to fight. I've warmed up," and he just kind of freezes, and he's just like, well, I was just kind of thinking, I just remembered that I actually already had a big meal today and yeah, I'm just gonna go back and go to sleep. So and he just waddles back into the cave, just big. He's the actual pansy. He's the real pansy of the episode. But he was cool. He had a really cool design. I liked him. And so we finally get to go back to the lookout. Bulma, she's working on the ship. Vegeta is doing some squats, just repping all this weight. Kibito and Piccolo talk to Bulma, and she's like, "Hey, think I'm ready." She fires up the ship, gets it going. Piccolo, Kibito, and Vegeta are in the ship or the plane. This is a ship. It's not the planes like they had, like Lorio has. Starts taking off, and for some reason Bulma's not in there though. She's not inside, and so it's like she wasn't trying to go with them. Um, but anyways, so the ship lifts up on the lookout and just goes. And an alarm just starts going off inside, and they just come crashing back down. They're still stuck. She hasn't quite gotten the ship to work, and that is where the episode ends. And it seems that those four are in need of hibiscus or hibis. I think that's what King Kadon said, Pansy's dad. Um, but yeah, and that's where the episode ends. This episode was really solid. I think it might sound cliche, but this was my favorite episode so far. It just gets better and better every single week. Be a beautiful choreography, beautiful animation. The art looked really pretty. We got some amazing shots. Lots and lots of lore. Holy cow. Like that's one thing Daima has been just giving us in heaps. We've just been getting lore and lore and lore, and I really like it, and I just hope it keeps continuing. Looking forward to next week. It looks really interesting. It's titled Collar, and so it seems to be about the slave collars that Pansy's wearing. And then we get a glimpse of the Tamagami, the fat one with the giant hammer. He's standing out like in the distance, and he's standing by the tree with like this big Dragon Ball like glowing on top of it. But those glowing Dragon Balls they're just like projections. They're like holograms, just kind of symbolizing like which Dragon Ball it is. The actual Dragon Ball that they have is like in their body. And so we're getting close, guys. We're really close to the Tamagami. I don't think it'll be next week, but I think the following episode is where they're going to fight that Tamagami. And so got some good stuff coming up. Thank you so much. That's all I have for you today. Like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Appreciate you, and we'll catch you guys next time.